Everyone knows the road is dangerous. Every small car is afraid of us, of our size, of how dangerous it is to pass. My ex didn't seem afraid at all. He chased me down during a trip, right in the middle of a busy highway. He threw his car at me like an angry little pinscher harassing a pit bull. The miles dragged on, and I was living through that hell until I couldn't avoid it anymore. I didn't notice him at first. That's the part people usually expect to be dramatic. The moment you recognize danger immediately, your instincts screaming before your brain catches up. But real life doesn't announce itself that way. Real danger usually slips in quietly, disguised as coincidence, familiarity, or something you thought you'd already survived. The highway was busy that afternoon, too busy for anything unusual to stand out. Cars stacked in loose formations, trucks holding their lanes like moving walls, the rhythm of traffic settling into that uneasy balance between speed and patience. I was running steady, focused on distance and timing, letting the road do what it always did, pull me forward and ask nothing else. That's when a small sedan merged behind me. Nothing aggressive, no sudden acceleration, no horn, just there. I registered it the same way you register hundreds of vehicles every day: position, color, distance, and then let it fade into the background. On the road, attention is selective. If you track everything, you lose the things that matter. A few minutes later, it was still there. Same distance, same lane, same persistence. That was the first flicker. Not alarm, recognition. I checked my mirrors again, more deliberately this time. The car adjusted slightly when I did, staying tucked just off my blind spot, close enough to be present, far enough to avoid drawing attention. That alone wouldn't have meant much on a crowded highway. People follow trucks all the time, using our slipstream, our predictability. But something about the way it moved felt intentional. I changed lanes. The sedan followed. Not immediately, a delayed response, just long enough to feel casual, but it followed. My jaw tightened without me realizing it. I told myself not to jump to conclusions. Not every coincidence is a threat. Not every familiar shape carries meaning. The road teaches you to second-guess paranoia just as much as it teaches you to respect instinct. Then I saw the license plate. My stomach dropped before my mind caught up. You never forget the car someone used to control you with, the way it pulled up beside you during arguments, the way it idled outside places it didn't belong, the way it turned movement into pressure. It was him. Years had passed since I'd last seen him, years since I'd rebuilt my life piece by piece, putting distance, physical and emotional, between myself and that version of my past. I hadn't told him my roots, hadn't shared my schedule, hadn't left breadcrumbs, and yet there he was, on a highway full of strangers, behind my truck. My hands stayed steady on the wheel, but everything else sharpened. The sound of the engine, the vibration of the cab, the way the traffic flowed around us like nothing had changed. I didn't look at him directly. Looking confirms things you might still be able to deny. Instead, I watched the car's behavior, the way it edged closer when traffic slowed, the way it backed off just enough when another vehicle slipped between us. He wasn't driving recklessly, not yet. He was positioning himself, testing. I accelerated slightly. He closed the gap. I slowed. He stayed close. That's when the memory clicked into place. Not a single moment, but a pattern. The way he used to provoke reactions without ever being obvious. The way he turned persistence into pressure and then blamed you for responding. Fear didn't hit me. Anger did. Cold, controlled, familiar. The road doesn't care about your history. It doesn't care about your past mistakes or the people you escaped. It only cares about physics, momentum, and choices made at speed. And now my past was sitting inches from my rear bumper, wrapped in steel and intent. He pulled closer, too close, close enough that I could see his face reflected faintly in my side mirror when the sun hit just right. He was smiling. That was the moment it stopped being coincidence. I moved into the right lane, signaling early, giving him every chance to pass and disappear forward like a normal driver would. For a split second, I thought he might. He didn't. He stayed with me. Then he surged forward, cutting alongside my cab, his car hovering near my front wheels, where any sudden move could turn catastrophic. Small cars are taught to respect that space. They know better. He didn't care. He drifted closer, forcing me to adjust my lane position to avoid clipping him. Traffic around us began to react. Brake lights flashing, horns sounding, a ripple of confusion spreading backward through the flow. My pulse stayed steady. This wasn't panic territory yet. This was management. I eased off the accelerator, creating space in front of me, refusing to be boxed in. He slowed too, matching me, lingering just long enough to make his presence unmistakable. He wasn't trying to crash, he was trying to intimidate, to remind me he could still reach me. Miles dragged by like that. Every exit sign felt heavier. Every passing minute stretched the situation thinner, like a wire pulled too tight. I couldn't stop. Stopping would give him what he wanted. I couldn't call for help without escalating unpredictably, and I couldn't outrun him without turning this into something far more dangerous for everyone around us. I started thinking in contingencies: traffic density, shoulder width, visibility, witnesses. He swerved suddenly, pushing his car toward my lane again, close enough that I felt the draft hit the cab. A deliberate move, a warning. I heard myself exhale slowly. Fine. If he wanted my attention, he was about to get it, just not the way he expected. I flicked my turn signal and took the next exit, not because I needed it, because exits change dynamics. The highway is neutral ground. Exits force decisions. He followed immediately, too quickly, betraying the patience he'd been performing up to that point. The ramp curved sharply, reducing speed, compressing space. I held my lane steady, watching him adjust behind me, closer now, more aggressive. At the bottom of the ramp, I didn't stop. I rolled through, merging onto the frontage road, accelerating just enough to keep control without inviting chaos. The road narrowed, fewer cars, less noise, more exposure. He swerved again, pushing his car back alongside me, shouting something I couldn't hear through glass and engine noise. His face wasn't smiling anymore. It was furious. I felt it then. Not fear, but certainty. This wasn't going to end on its own. Whatever I did next would define how this finished, and I was done being chased. The frontage road stripped away the illusion of safety almost immediately. On the highway, danger is diluted by volume. Lanes, speed, noise, everything spreads risk thin enough that you can pretend it isn't personal. Off the ramp, that protection vanished. Fewer cars, fewer exits, fewer witnesses. The road narrowed into something that demanded intention instead of momentum. He stayed with me, not behind anymore, beside me, close enough that I could see the tension in his jaw, the way his hands clenched the steering wheel like it was an extension of his anger. He wasn't yelling now. He didn't need to. His presence was the message. I kept my eyes forward. You never look directly at someone who wants your reaction. Attention is currency, and I wasn't paying him in the way he wanted. I accelerated slightly. He matched it. I slowed. He stayed glued to my side, his front bumper hovering dangerously close to my wheels, exploiting the one place no small car should ever linger. Every truck driver knows that space isn't just blind, it's lethal. One misjudgment, one bump, and physics takes over without mercy. He knew that too. That was the point. Traffic thinned further as the road bent away from the main flow. Warehouses appeared, then faded. Long stretches of fencing, patches of scrub grass soaked dark from earlier rain. This wasn't a place anyone casually drove through, unless they had a reason. I felt my shoulders tighten. Not fear. Preparation. I ran scenarios faster than I could name them. If he tried to brake check me, I had distance. If he swerved again, I'd already adjusted my lane position to give myself room. If he forced me to stop, that was the worst outcome, one I would avoid at all costs. Stopping turns motion into vulnerability. He cut in front of me suddenly, hard enough that I had to tap the brakes to maintain safe distance. The trailer shifted slightly behind me, heavy and obedient, reminding me of the mass I was controlling. He slowed, deliberately, testing. I didn't honk. I didn't flash my lights. Those are emotional reactions. They escalate things in ways you can't control. Instead, I backed off, increasing the gap, refusing to let him dictate the tempo. That's when he did something that made my stomach drop. He hit his brakes. Not a full stop, just enough. Enough to force me to respond. I braked smoothly, steady pressure, keeping the truck straight, refusing to let panic jerk my hands. The distance closed faster than I liked, steel compressing space in ways that don't forgive mistakes. He accelerated again, laughing now, actually laughing, his head tilting back for a second like this was entertainment. That sound, even imagined, snapped something into focus inside me. This wasn't about seeing me. It wasn't about closure. It was about control. And control is the one thing I'd fought too hard to rebuild to hand back now. The road curved again, leading toward an industrial stretch with long sightlines and wide shoulders. I recognized it instantly. I'd driven this area before, years ago, during a different life, hauling loads that didn't matter nearly as much as staying unnoticed did. A plan started forming, not impulsive, calculated, risk measured against consequence. I signaled again, early, deliberately turning onto a wide access road that ran parallel to a series of loading yards. No businesses open, no pedestrians, just asphalt, rain-darkened and empty. He followed without hesitation, too easily. That told me everything. If this had been about confrontation, he would have wanted people around. If it had been about words, he would have wanted witnesses. The fact that he followed me into emptier space meant he believed isolation favored him. He was wrong. I eased the truck down to a steady speed, not slow enough to invite a stop, not fast enough to look like flight. My mirrors showed him drifting closer again, his car angling toward my lane like he was preparing to force something. That's when I did something I hadn't planned on doing until the last possible moment. I tapped the trailer brake. Just a tap. Not enough to lock anything up, not enough to be reckless, just enough to change the rhythm. The effect was immediate. The trailer tugged back slightly, weight shifting, altering the way the truck decelerated in a way he wasn't anticipating. His car jolted, brakes squealing as he reacted late, suddenly too close to control comfortably. His eyes widened. For the first time since this started, I saw uncertainty flicker across his face. I didn't capitalize on it yet. I let him recover. Let him think it was a mistake. Let him believe he still understood the situation. The access road ended ahead, funneling back toward a larger arterial with more traffic. That was both good and bad. More eyes, more variables, more chances for things to go wrong. He surged again, angry now, slamming his horn, swerving closer than before. His car clipped the edge of my lane, tires kissing the line like he was daring me to react. I felt it then, the moment when restraint stops being wisdom and starts becoming liability. I couldn't let this continue, not for miles, not for an exit, not until he decided how far he was willing to go. I needed to end it on my terms. The arterial came into view, cars moving fast, impatient, unaware of the storm brewing just off their path. I signaled left, committing fully, merging with authority instead of apology. The truck entered the flow cleanly, my speed matching traffic smoothly. He hesitated, just for a second. That hesitation told me he hadn't planned beyond intimidation, beyond pressure, beyond forcing a reaction. When he followed, he did it sloppily, cutting across lanes too aggressively, drawing attention now. Horns blared, brake lights flashed. The anonymity he'd relied on began to crack. Good. I positioned the truck in the center lane, boxed by vehicles on either side, forcing him to stay behind me. He tried to slip left. A car closed the gap. He tried right. Another truck held its ground. For the first time, he was constrained. I checked my mirrors. He was furious and desperate. That combination is dangerous. I knew then that whatever I was about to do would look insane to anyone watching without context. It would look excessive. It would look reckless. But context matters, and survival doesn't always look reasonable from the outside. The next move had to be decisive, irreversible, something that broke his pattern completely. My hands tightened on the wheel. My breathing slowed. And I committed. The moment I committed, there was no space left for doubt. Indecision gets people killed on the road. Not speed, not weather, not even aggression. Hesitation is what turns bad situations into irreversible ones. I had learned that lesson long before him, long before this truck, long before this stretch of highway ever mattered. I checked my mirrors one last time. Cars boxed me in on both sides, a sedan to my left, a pickup to my right. Enough traffic to prevent him from pulling alongside again. Enough witnesses to change the rules without me saying a word. He rode my bumper now, so close I couldn't see his headlights anymore. That was intentional too. He wanted me nervous, wanted me second-guessing every micro-adjustment of speed, wanted me thinking about the mass behind me instead of the threat behind that. What he didn't understand was that proximity works both ways. I eased my foot off the accelerator. Not braking, just letting physics speak first. The truck began to decelerate naturally, thousands of pounds responding smoothly, predictably. The cars ahead adjusted without panic. The sedan to my left drifted forward. The pickup to my right did the same. The space behind me disappeared instantly. His brakes screamed. Metal shrieked as he swerved, barely keeping control, his front end snapping sideways before correcting violently. I saw his face then, clear as day in the mirror, eyes wide, mouth open, the expression of someone who had finally realized he wasn't the only one capable of making reckless decisions. Traffic reacted now. Horns, brake lights, movement. Eyes. Lots of eyes. I didn't speed up. I didn't slow further. I held steady, letting the situation stabilize around me instead of fighting it. He fell back, forced to create distance. His car suddenly very small behind the wall of steel and motion I controlled. But he didn't leave. That's what worried me. Most people back off when they lose control publicly. Shame has a way of cutting through anger. Not him. He stayed there, pacing me again once traffic smoothed out, weaving just enough to signal that this wasn't over. That's when I saw the sign. Road work ahead, right lane closed, 1 mile. My pulse didn't change. If anything, my focus sharpened. Construction zones scare most drivers. Narrow lanes, barriers, reduced shoulders, no room for error. That's exactly why I wanted it. Chaos compresses choices, and compressed choices force mistakes. I signaled early, clear, predictable. I moved toward the open lane as cones began to appear, orange flashing against gray pavement. Traffic slowed naturally, funneling tighter. Barriers rose on either side, concrete walls erasing escape routes. He followed. Of course he did. By the time we entered the construction zone, everything had changed. Speed dropped, lanes narrowed, the flow became cautious, tense. Workers weren't present, just equipment, barriers, and the kind of enforced order that punishes impatience. I positioned the truck perfectly. Centered, dominant, unmovable. He tried to edge left. There was no left. He tried to edge right. Concrete. For the first time since this started, he was trapped in my wake with no angles left to exploit. I felt the weight of the moment settle in my chest. This was it. If he stayed aggressive here, it wouldn't be between us anymore. It would involve everyone. Authorities, cameras, reports, consequences he couldn't shout his way out of. I adjusted my speed again, just slightly under the posted limit. Legal, defensible, agonizingly slow to someone running on adrenaline. He flashed his lights, once, twice. I didn't respond. He leaned on the horn, long, frustrated, childish. The driver behind him honked back. That sound mattered. It meant the narrative had shifted. He wasn't the pursuer anymore. He was the problem. I saw him gesture wildly, his arm flailing inside the car, his mouth forming words no one could hear. He edged closer again, testing space that no longer existed. I tapped the brakes. Firm. Controlled. Enough to light them. Enough to send a message. Traffic compressed instantly. The truck responded like it was built to do this. Steady, stable, obedient. His car jolted again, skidding slightly before correcting, tires screaming louder than before. This time, the car behind him nearly clipped his bumper. Now there was chaos. Not mine, his. I held my lane. I held my speed. I held control. A flash of blue and red appeared in my mirror. Distant, then closer. Highway patrol. I hadn't seen them pull out, hadn't heard a siren yet, but they were there now, threading through traffic with purpose. I felt something release inside me. Not relief, resolution. He saw them too. I watched his behavior change instantly, posture collapsing inward, aggression evaporating, bravado dissolving into compliance in real time. He backed off hard, creating distance like it had been his idea all along. The patrol car slipped in behind him, lights on, siren brief, decisive. He tried to signal right, then left, unsure, panicking now in a way that was almost familiar. The officer guided him out of the flow toward the narrow shoulder, where the construction briefly widened. I didn't slow to watch. I didn't gloat. I didn't look back again. I drove. Miles passed before my hands started shaking. Not violently. Delayed. The kind of shaking that comes once your body realizes the danger has actually passed. I pulled into the next rest area without thinking, parked far from the entrance, engine idling while I stared straight ahead. I stayed there longer than necessary, breathing, replaying. Not the chase, the choices. What I'd done, what I hadn't, what could have gone wrong. People imagine doing something crazy as losing control. This wasn't that. This was choosing control in a situation designed to strip it from me. I didn't feel proud. I felt intact, and that mattered more than anything else. When I finally shut off the engine and stepped out into the open air, the highway roared on behind me like nothing had happened. But I knew better, and so did he. I didn't leave the rest area right away. That surprised me more than anything else. Normally, once the immediate danger passes, I move. Distance has always been my way of closing chapters. Put miles between me and whatever tried to derail my day, and let the road do what it does best, absorb it. But this time, my body refused to follow that instinct. The adrenaline had nowhere to go. My hands were still shaking, subtle but persistent, like my nervous system hadn't caught up with the reality that I was no longer being hunted. My jaw ached from how hard I'd been clenching it. When I realized that, I forced myself to loosen it, one breath at a time. I checked my mirrors again. Old habit. No sign of him. No sign of the patrol car either. That should have been comforting. Instead, it left space for everything else to rush in. Memories don't ask permission. They don't arrive politely, in order, or when it's convenient. They come the moment your defenses drop. the moment your body believes it's safe enough to process what just happened. And suddenly, I wasn't just reacting to a car on the highway, I was reacting to him. The same patterns, the same entitlement, the same need to control the situation when he felt ignored, the same escalation when silence didn't bend the way he expected it to. I remembered the first time I'd noticed it, years ago when it still felt small enough to excuse. How he used to tailgate other drivers just to intimidate them. How he'd laugh it off afterward, say people were too sensitive. How road rage to him wasn't danger, it was entertainment. I'd told myself back then that it wasn't about me, that it wouldn't turn inward. That was the lie. It always turns inward eventually. I stepped out of the cab and paced slowly along the edge of the lot, rain long gone now, the air thick with exhaust and heat. Other drivers moved around me, checking straps, tossing trash, making calls. Normal life continuing without interruption. None of them knew. That anonymity cut both ways. It kept me invisible, but it also meant I had no witnesses to what this had really been. I thought about the officer, about what he might be hearing right now. Two sides of a story don't weigh the same when one of them knows how to perform calm. My ex had always been good at that. He could flatten his tone, slow his breathing, make himself sound reasonable while pushing just hard enough to keep others off balance. I knew that version of him well. I also knew the version that came out once doors closed and no one was watching. The thought made my stomach tighten. I debated calling it in myself, giving my version first, putting my name on record before he could frame the narrative. Then reality asserted itself. I was a woman alone in a truck, an immigrant, a professional driver whose livelihood depended on clean reports and predictable behavior. He was a man in a car claiming harassment. I'd seen how that math plays out. Sometimes staying quiet isn't weakness, it's strategy. Still, the decision weighed on me, because silence carries its own cost.
After nearly 20 minutes, my phone buzzed. Once, then again. Unknown number. I stared at the screen. Didn't answer. It buzzed a third time. I let it go to voicemail. A few seconds later, the notification appeared. I didn't play it right away. I didn't need to. I knew his voice well enough to hear it without sound. I knew the cadence he'd use, injured, indignant, framing himself as the one wronged. Eventually, I listened. It was exactly what I expected. He said I'd lost it, said I'd tried to brake check him, said I was dangerous, said he was just worried and had followed me to make sure I was okay. I almost laughed. Almost. What stopped me was the realization that this wasn't over just because the chase was. People like him don't retreat because they're scared. They retreat to regroup. I deleted the voicemail, not out of fear, out of control. I wanted no trace of his voice living in my space longer than necessary. I climbed back into the cab and sat there with the engine off, hands resting on the wheel like muscle memory needed reassurance. The truck felt solid beneath me, familiar, honest. Steel doesn't lie. I thought about how close this had come to ending differently, about how one bad decision, braking too hard, swerving, reacting emotionally instead of strategically, could have turned this into a headline instead of a lesson. And that's when something hardened inside me. Not anger, boundaries. I didn't owe him explanations. I didn't owe him closure. I didn't owe him access. What I owed myself was distance, not just physical, but permanent. I pulled back onto the highway when my breathing finally evened out, merged smoothly, let the miles rebuild a sense of scale. The road opened up again, wide and indifferent, like it always does once it's done testing you. But I wasn't the same driver I'd been that morning. Not shaken, recalibrated. I knew now, with painful clarity, that the danger hadn't been the truck, or the speed, or the weather, or even the highway. The danger had been familiarity. And familiarity is the hardest thing to defend against, because it knows exactly where you're weakest.
I didn't check my phone again for the rest of the drive. I didn't need to. Some chapters don't close with conversations. They close with movement, and I was already moving forward. The highway stretched out ahead of me like nothing had happened. That was the most unsettling part. Same lanes, same signs, same rhythm of tires against asphalt. If someone had watched me from a distance, they would have seen a truck moving normally through traffic. Steady speed, no swerving, no hesitation. Nothing to suggest that less than an hour earlier, my past had come roaring back at 70 miles an hour. But inside the cab, everything had shifted. I kept replaying the small details, not the obvious ones, not the chase itself, but the moments in between. The way he'd matched my speed instead of passing, the way he'd lingered just close enough to feel intentional, the way he'd waited for traffic to box me in before making his move. Those weren't emotional decisions, they were tactical. That realization landed heavier than fear ever could. I'd spent years convincing myself that leaving him behind had been enough, that distance erased patterns, that time dulled entitlement, that whatever version of him existed now wasn't my problem anymore. I was wrong. Some people don't let go just because you do. I checked my mirrors again. Nothing. Still, I adjusted my driving. Not drastically, just enough to stay unpredictable. Slight changes in speed, lane changes that didn't follow the usual flow. I wasn't trying to escape anything anymore. I was testing the environment. Awareness doesn't switch off just because danger exits the frame. A patrol car passed me going the opposite direction. I watched it disappear. No relief followed. Law enforcement is a presence, not a guarantee. That's something the road teaches you early. The farther I drove, the more the adrenaline drained, leaving behind something colder and more analytical. I started cataloging what I'd learned. He knew my routes better than he should have. He knew how to push without crossing lines that would immediately get him pulled over. He knew how to provoke reaction while framing himself as passive. And most importantly, he knew that I wouldn't want attention. That was the lever he'd used. I hated how accurate that calculation had been. By the time I stopped for fuel, dusk had settled in, painting the sky in dull oranges and bruised purples. I parked near the edge of the lot, lights on, engine idling longer than necessary. Before stepping out, I scanned every vehicle around me. Sedans, SUVs, pickups. None familiar. Still, I stayed alert. Inside the station, the air felt thick and artificial, fluorescent lights humming overhead. A cashier nodded at me without really seeing me. Another customer scrolled through his phone, oblivious. Normal. That normalcy felt fragile. As I pumped fuel, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I didn't pick up. A text followed. We need to talk. No apology. No explanation, a demand disguised as a request. I stared at the screen, rain from earlier still streaking the glass of my cab behind me, and something finally snapped into place. This wasn't about the highway. It wasn't even about control. It was about refusal. He couldn't accept that I no longer belonged to the version of my life he remembered, that I'd built something without him, that I existed in spaces he couldn't access anymore. And that terrified him. I blocked the number. Not dramatically, not ceremonially, just decisively. The kind of decision you make when you're done negotiating with ghosts. Back on the road, night settled fully, headlights carving narrow tunnels through darkness. Traffic thinned, the world reduced itself to movement and distance again. That's when the exhaustion hit. Not physical, emotional. The kind that creeps in once you realize how much energy you've spent staying composed instead of falling apart. I pulled into a rest area and parked under lights, choosing a spot with clear lines of sight in every direction. I didn't sleep right away. I sat there, engine ticking as it cooled, listening to other trucks arrive and depart. Each sound grounded me. Each reminder that I wasn't alone mattered. I thought about how close I'd come to reacting differently, about how easy it would have been to let anger take the wheel, about how quickly that could have escalated into something irreversible. People love stories where the right choice is obvious. Real life doesn't offer that clarity. It offers seconds and consequences. By the time I lay down, curtains drawn but not fully closed, I understood something with brutal honesty. What I'd done on that highway wasn't crazy. It was controlled, calculated, necessary. And the fact that I'd survived without anyone else ever knowing how close it came didn't make it less real. It made it more dangerous. Because tomorrow, I'd get back on the road, and so would he. And the difference now was that I was no longer pretending the past couldn't catch up. I'd seen its headlights in my mirror, and I wasn't going to ignore them again. Morning came without relief. The sky was clear, almost mocking. No storms, no haze, just clean daylight stretching over the highway like a promise it had no intention of keeping. I hated mornings like that. They make everything feel resolved when nothing is. I rolled out early, before most drivers stirred. Fewer variables, less noise. The road felt open again, but I didn't relax into it. I couldn't afford to, not anymore. The first hour passed quietly. Too quietly. I told myself I wasn't being followed, that what happened yesterday had ended where the sun went down, that blocking the number had drawn a clean line. But experience has a way of whispering when logic tries to shout. At a long straightaway, I noticed a car far back in my mirror. Black, compact, easy to miss. I didn't react. Cars appear and disappear all the time. That alone means nothing. 10 minutes later, it was still there. Same distance, same lane. I adjusted my speed slightly. So did it. My jaw tightened. I waited another mile, then changed lanes. It followed. Not aggressively, not immediately, just enough to confirm intention without advertising it. My chest didn't tighten this time. My mind did. This wasn't yesterday's chaos. This was persistence. Traffic thickened as the highway approached a major interchange. Trucks clustered together. Cars wove impatiently between them. I used that congestion deliberately, letting larger vehicles box me in, limiting angles of approach. The black car stayed back, watching. I took an exit I hadn't planned to take. Not sudden, not sharp, smooth, legal, ordinary. In my mirror, the car hesitated, then followed. That was confirmation. Something shifted inside me then. A line crossed quietly but completely. Fear drained out, replaced by something colder and far more dangerous. Resolve. I wasn't being chased anymore. I was being tested. I thought about calling the police. Then I thought about how this would sound. My ex is following me. No threats, no contact, no collision. Just presence, just pattern. I knew how that conversation would go. I'd lived long enough to know what gets taken seriously and what gets dismissed as paranoia until it's too late. So I did something else. I drove toward visibility, toward cameras, toward places where escalation would cost him more than it would cost me. I aimed for a way station, not because I needed inspection, but because he wouldn't. Those places terrify people with something to hide. As the station came into view, marked clearly with signs and flashing lights, I slowed, signaling early. In the mirror, the black car wavered. That hesitation told me everything. At the last second, it veered back onto the highway, didn't follow, didn't linger, just vanished into traffic like it had never existed. I pulled into the station anyway, parked, engine off, hands steady on the wheel. I sat there for a long moment, letting the realization settle. He wasn't brave, he was opportunistic, and opportunists retreat when the odds shift. By the time I pulled back onto the road, something fundamental had changed. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was setting terms. The rest of the day passed without incident, but the lessons stayed sharp. I documented everything: times, locations, routes. Not emotionally, precisely. Facts don't fade when memory tries to. That night, parked among other trucks under harsh white lights, I finally allowed myself to feel it. The anger. Not explosive, focused. The kind that clarifies boundaries instead of blurring them. I wasn't going to reroute my life around him. I wasn't going to disappear to make him comfortable. And I wasn't going to rely on luck to protect me. The road demands awareness. So does survival. And if he thought chasing me would bring me back into something I'd already escaped, he'd misunderstood me completely. I wasn't running anymore. I was driving forward. And next time, if there was a next time, I wouldn't just endure it. I'd end it. The road didn't give him another opening after that. Or maybe it did, and he chose not to take it. Either way, I never saw that car again. No sudden appearances in my mirrors. No familiar headlights lingering too long. No messages, no calls, no attempts to remind me of who he used to be. And that silence told me more than confrontation ever could. Because people like him don't stop when they're satisfied. They stop when they realize control is no longer available. Days passed, then weeks. Miles stacked on miles the way they always do. New routes, new deliveries, new stretches of highway that didn't know my history and didn't care to learn it. And slowly, without ceremony, my body let go of the tension it had been holding. Not relief, closure. There's a difference. Relief is temporary. Closure changes how you move. I thought a lot about what could have happened if I'd reacted differently, if I'd panicked, if I'd slammed the brakes, if I'd tried to outrun him, if I'd pretended it wasn't happening. None of those paths ended well. The road doesn't reward denial. It punishes hesitation. What saved me wasn't strength. It wasn't speed. It wasn't even courage the way people like to imagine it. It was clarity. The moment I stopped hoping he'd stop and started acting like he wouldn't, everything shifted. That's something no one tells you. Danger doesn't always look like violence. Sometimes it looks like persistence. Sometimes it looks like familiarity refusing to let go. Sometimes it looks like someone who knows exactly how far to push without crossing a line that gets them caught. And sometimes the only way out isn't louder fear, it's quieter resolve. I didn't need to win. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to prove anything. I just needed to stay in control of my space, my movement, my decisions. That's what the road teaches you, if you survive long enough to listen. People ask why I still drive alone, why I didn't quit after that, why I didn't choose something safer. The truth is simple. I didn't survive all that just to shrink my world afterward. The road didn't take anything from me that day. It gave me something back. If you stayed until the end of this story, it's not because of trucks or highways or drama. It's because at some point in your life, you've felt that moment where someone tried to reinsert themselves into a chapter you'd already closed. Maybe you froze. Maybe you fought. Maybe you're still deciding. If this story hit close to home, I want to hear that. You don't have to explain everything, just enough to say, I recognize that feeling. Leave it in the comments. Someone else reading might need that reminder that they're not alone. And if you want to keep following these stories, the ones that happen between exits, inside decisions no one else sees, subscribe and stay with me. This channel isn't about chaos, it's about control. If this earned it, leave a like. Not for me, but so this story reaches someone scrolling late at night, wondering if trusting their instinct is enough. It is. I'll see you on the next stretch of road.